I'm really sorry.
Naomba radhi hakika.
IKONINI. So this past weekend kuna vile Citizen wali end up wamerun a piece on how the Kenyan church is starting to criticize Ruto, and wacha tucheki a part of it.
Watch ourselves going down.
Masomo ya dini kanisani sasa yameonekana kuzamia matukio ya hivi punde kuhusu siasa za nchi, baadhi ya wahubiri wakionekana kukerwa na matukio hayo.
All the way till now, I have always been thinking that this government is a government of God.
Kwa maana wakati huu wote nilikuwa nafikiria serikali hii ni serikali ya Mungu.
Because it's the one we voted for.
Kwa maana ndio tulioichagua.
To our embarrassment.
Lakini kwa aibu yetu,
it's a government of fights.
This is not...
Okay, so umesikia, to our embarrassment, it's a government of fights. But one of the other pastors that was featured on that name fulani anaitwa Reverend Kiama, and Reverend Kiama has been very consistent lately in calling out this government. And unajua huyu ni mse ameita hii a government of criminals. Like he's been out there mpaka kuna watu wanaulizaga like isn't he worried about his safety? So ye mwenye kwa that piece, that was something that was good to see.
They are impeaching Rigathi Gachagua, the deputy president, because of corruption. It is the pot calling the kettle black. Which of those guys would be the first, as in literally, they are all a bunch of thugs. Literally. But what breaks my heart the most, is that this was a government of God. This government was endorsed by church. Literally, the church endorsed this government. It was literally pushed down our throats by our church elders, by our church fathers. This is the man. This is the one God has said, Anatosha, ni huyu.
Sawa, macheki. So, church ilituambiaga kuwa Ruto anatosha, alafu of course Ruto kabaki ameishia kwa church, alafu he did that thing. Like Ruto is such a good actor. You semaga that after I retire he wants to be an evangelist, but what I tell him, Hollywood has a lot of money. You should try Hollywood. Najua, like you are a really good actor. And so what ended up happening is church kept telling us that this was the guy. And I always wonder like, why was this the guy? Because he come to stories of Ruto tumemjuaga from day one. Like we've always known Ruto as this guy who everywhere that he goes, corruption follows. And apart from corruption, kuna time tuko tunaitaga Ruto arap mashamba. Paka people used to make memes, and the memes were like ati Ruto akisimama place yoyote waganaangalia land and he thinks about the land that he's going to steal. So let's go back to 28th of June 2013. This is how many years before the elections? This is at least 9 years and 2 months before the 2022 elections.
To the deputy president now, and William Ruto has lost ownership of the 100-acre parcel of land in Uasin Gishu County following a ruling by the High Court today. The court has further ordered the deputy president to pay the complainant Adrian Muteshi 5 million shillings for trespassing on his land and denying him use of his property since 2008. The ruling made by High Court Judge Rose Ougo stated that Ruto failed to provide evidence that he purchased the land belonging to the complainant. Ruto had, through his lawyers, told the court that he purchased the land from a third party, Dorothy Yator, and that he himself had not directly been involved in the transactions. He therefore indicated that he was a victim of fraud. Muteshi, on the other hand, says that he was forcefully evicted during the 2007-2008 post-election violence.
Eskia. So, Muteshi alitolewagwa during the 2007-2008 post-election violence. This guy ended up taking 100 acres of a poor man. By poor, I put poor in quotes, because what I mean is of someone who actually works for their money, not a politician. Because politicians in Kenya, tunajua, they don't work hard. Never let anyone let you know that also on our card. So this was vile nimesema 9 years before the elections. What about ilikuwa like 6 years before the elections? Ile time ourselves walikuwa nafikiria juu ya kuran juu ya re-election. There was also another piece, and this piece was comparing corruption in the president's office versus the deputy president's office, and you can guess who won.
According to the Infotruck poll, public perception of the Jubilee duo is that of a government that is taking more from its people than it is actually giving them. Kenyans believe that the office of the deputy president is rocked by high cases of corruption as compared to the president's office.
Mecheki? So, the government of God. So, are you trying to tell me that God is corrupt? Ama, what were we trying to say here? That now we are surprised that this guy. Alafu, Ruto ni msatafanya ukumbuke wase wengine waleta tulikam tukasahau. Kuna kabuda fulani, tuka tunamuonaga back in the days, alikuwa naitagua Mwalimu Mati. Sijui kama mnamkumbuka. Huyu buda alikuwa nafaa kuwa, he was the head of something. I think Transparency International. And as the Nini of Transparency International, he once also did like a certain piece. And he's the guy who told us that at some point, kuna vile Ruto alikuwa na title deed ya processional way. Was that try to imagine someone who has the title deed of a place, yani of a road. And this road was only recovered after KANU was kicked out. And after KANU was kicked out, of course, kuna vile like Kibaki ended up taking over. And when Kibaki took over, that's how he was able to like regain the land. So you can try and imagine. So where did this guy become the guy who had been selected by God? This is where what I'm trying to understand. Considering that kulikuwa na prophets, the like of Prophet Teresia Wairimo, the likes of Prophet Watt, walikuwa wameignore all this thing of this guy being in the Y2K wakaibia Kenya. Kuna place inasemekana kama base zake washaiba over 194 billion. Apart from that, kuna mse kama Rotich base yake ule alilose over 30 billion, Kionjori 41 billion, alafu nini pia kulikuwa na 123 billion from story ya Charles Keter. So how did this guy become the guy chosen by God?
The Youth for KANU movement that he was one of the prime forces behind was a very, very damaging movement. It took youth, bribed them, and tried to convince them that we should stay with the autocratic KANU. There's a road that leads from State House down into town. It's called Processional Way. Mr. Ruto actually returned the titles to that road in 2003 after the NARC election. In what capacity had he ended up owning a road is the question you should ask him.
Masikia jo. So umse alikuwa ana own road, processional way. Kwa ushaitumia ni inaingiaga ikienda State House hivi. So you can try and imagine how much anger he gets every day just going there, knowing that we are using his road. Akiona magari zingine hapo, anaona zile mapikipiki zake ziko mbele, ako like, do you know this is Ruto's road? This is passing through my land. But this was the guy that was selected by God. But now we have to go back to how hii church waga mata ingine unaangaliaga hizi story, alafu unaona the fact that there are actually Kenyans who believe that church leaders talk to God directly. And it's a very sad state of affairs for you to start believing that another human has supernatural powers. And it's one of those things where I can never take you away from your comfort zone. All I can tell you is you're being scammed, and you're being scammed by everyone from Prophet Uhuru to Prophet Teresia Wairimu to Prophet whoever calls themselves a prophet is lying to you. Hakuna kitu hasa wanaweza predict. That's why wanafanyaga guesswork. Because if Teresia was a prophet, she'd have prophesied that in less than 2 years, Gachagua and Ruto will be at each other's necks. Ulicheki vile Gachagua alisema, Mr. President, for the past 1 year, you have caused me pain. Acheki. Kwa nini Teresia hakuwa anajua hiyo story? Saa hizi vile Gachagua ashatoka, ashaona like maybe most of her congregation natoka from Central, and now she wants to appease the masses. But kuna vile Uhuru alikuwa ametuon juu hii story, na Uhuru alituambiaga how the church was connected to all this Ruto corruption. And this was back in the days when Uhuru was very unpopular, and Uhuru was, what can I say? He was being accused of betraying Mount Kenya.
And that he did.
Woka haha na bese yoralia. Ne bese siagereirwo no gutwarira andu Elgeyo Marakweti damu bilioni 3 Negetha ciana cia Ngai inyue maaĩ, negetha ciana cia Ngai ihote kũrĩma, neguo ciekero muhuko wa mundu woka koroga makanitha ati ndakunengera milioni 2 uke haha tuinagire hallelujah.
In a speech largely delivered in his native Kikuyu language, to the cheers of the attendees, the president accused his deputy of stealing from the government he worked in and sanitizing it in church.
Kama woigana riakwa thithineire handu ha milioni yetwo handu ha milioni etigathinetie mundu na haki yake ya maisha bururi uyu tutiga kwaraniria maheni.
In fact, the president says his deputy, with whom they had been elected to office thrice, had even found a clique of clergymen whom they would share the loot with, pointing an accusing finger at the men of God for helping DP Ruto to spread his gospel instead of that of God. In a no-holds-barred speech that had the head of state try to catch his breath severally, given the mode of delivery, insisted this came from his heart, asking the electorate, especially those in Mount Kenya, to be wary of DP Ruto.
So, umecheki hii story. So, Uhuru alituonja hii story na katuon jia vile church ilikuwa inatumika. Lazima ujue, preachers, this is a business. And the church is a business. And if you're in that business, you're trying to make as much money as possible. So, ukiletewa do na Ruto huwezi kataa. Utabaki umeichukua. Ikibidi umuendos, unamuendos. Alafu, what do you end up with? We end up with the catastrophe that we have right now. But I don't think even the church could have predicted this level of fuckery. Like, hii ni level ingine kali kabisa. But mimi vile naiangalia ni anyone udanganywa sijui leaders are chosen by God, what. If you look at world history, uta notice that leaders are not chosen by God. And that's the reason why some of the godless countries where you'll never hear a national prayer day, are some of the most developed and some of the least corrupt countries. China is basically a godless country. Uki open church China ama open mosque, that is enough to take you to jail. Najua hatakagi hiyo story ya foreign religions. They mess with their whole thing, spirituality, Buddha, whatever, but that's not their focus. Focus ya China, ukiona hata watoi wanafundishagwa science na vitu kama hizo, because they're trying to prepare the kids for this world. But ukipatikana ukiwa corrupt, unaenda kunyongwa. Tukiangalia wapi? Japan, of course, inakuwa another country. Tukienda place kama Europe, tuangalie countries kama kina Sweden, whatever, unapata zote church inaendelea kienda chini. Na ukicampaign huwezi campaign na church. You have to campaign with what you're going to do. But here in Kenya, Ruto got that like secret formula, and he knew that all he needs to do is pretend that yeye ni mtu wa kuomba. That's why right now unaweza chikizo memes. Kuna meme yake fulani ameshikilia gazeti hivi, alafu imeandikwa that's what he does on Sunday, alafu weekdays anatembea na gun. That's just to show us that this is not the guy that tuko tunafikiria. And still tukibonga juu story, of course saizo sana angalia corruption, na nachiki vile corruption imefika level lingine ile ni ridiculous kabisa. Na history ya corruption kwa ridiculous, where we've ended up even with Adani, and Adani is taking the airport. We still have to go back to Uhuru, because Uhuru knew this guy more than me and you. But sisi of course tulikuwa na ujuaji yetu ile Uhuru amebetray nani. But wacha tusikie kile Uhuru alikuwa anasema.
Wenzangu wa Bungoma, msicheze na moto. Si mumecheza na moto na mumeumia? Si mumecheza na moto na mumeumia? Munataka kurudi kwa moto ama munataka kuokoka? Munataka kuokoka? Njia ya kuokoka ni Baba. Nawaambia. Njia ya kuokoka ni nini? Njia ya kuokoka ni nini? Afadhali mzee ambaye ni mtulivu, ambaye hana haja ya kujaza mifuko yake, ambaye atachunga masilahi ya watu yake, badala ya mdomo tamtamu, lakini akiingia ni wale wa kufanya moja yako, nusu ya mwananchi, 2 yako na 5 yangu. Na mnawajua nyinyi, mnawajua.
So hii ilikuwa like hiyo analogy hiyo ya tano kwangu. If you look at the Adani deal, that's what you see. You see a president who's decided that he's going to auction the country as long as he makes money, and he makes a lot of money. Na saizi vile ameenda pa kimpeach Gachagua, of course kuna wase wa ODM wanaichukua like some sort of victory. Alafu pia hapa chiki ile design ya Uhuru alikuwa anaendorse Raila at this point. And at this point I think a lot of us tuko tunafikiria Raila was still the Raila that we know, but he's ended up being someone else. Unajua, like ameend up akitushtua sisi wote. Do I still think he'd have made a better president than Ruto? Yes, I do. Do I think right now he's part of the problem? Yes. Like in 2027 hatutaki kumwona kwa ballot, na hatutaki tunataka anyone who runs against Ruto has to win according to mimi. Like wacha to msea kuembaya, na pia jue if you're bad you get 5 years and then you unabaki umeishia. Church on the other side, you have to choose. Are you prophets? Because a prophet is supposed to see into the future. If you can't see into the future, you're not a prophet. You're doing guesswork. Nacheki, mimi sijaijita prophet, but I can see some of these things. Najua tulipredict the violence against Morara Kebaso. Tulisema huyo ataanza kutandikwa hapa mbele. Did it happen? Yes. What else have we predicted? We predict 2027 what's going to happen. Ruto atarun a campaign machine against anyone who stands against him, na itakuwa that person is not different from me, so just vote for me. So hiyo campaign tunajua itakuwa, and pia kutakuwa na a very unique campaign ya kuambia majenzi that hakuna tofauti ya whoever will be running against Ruto and Ruto. So that campaign is going to be there, and the probability of Ruto coming back is very high. Not because he's this exceptional politician that people say he is. No, he's going to come back because of, number one, voter apathy. If people decide to stay home because hakuna difference katikati ya leader na leader. Na pia, of course, he has the government machinery. So there's going to be a certain level of rigging. But now, as we look at Rigiji, nikimalizia hii story, kuna wase saizi wameanza kutokea pia wakisema vile waliprofesai vitu, na pia wanaendelea kuprofesai what's going to happen in 2027, na kilene wacha tusikie ufala.
Mimi nilimwambia mambo ya Gachagua kitambo, nikamwambia, nilikuwa mtu wa kwanza kumwambia mambo ya shahuda aache. Watu wakaniambia wewe unapiga mtu wetu. Nikajaribu kumwambia aache. Hii sasa nataka mimi kuambia watu wa Mount Kenya ukweli. Tuko half term ya William Ruto. Mimi nimeiangalia mbali. Huyu rais atarudi 2027. Na kula yake na muende muandike mahali. It will be more than 70%.
Hapo ndio na pause kidogo, alafu nabonga na huyu Mwangi wa Iria in French. 70% ya nyokwa. Kwenda huko. Kuna 70% mse atapata. Is he going to rig? Yes, he's going to rig. And but more than rig, the machinery that's going to be used ni kukuambia there is no difference between leaders, and a lot of people are going to fall for that nonsense because we live in a very interesting world, and it's not just in Kenya. Hii kitu ina happen worldwide where the younger generation inaambiwa iangalie history in this ideal lenses where everyone has to be perfect. That's why utapata maplace kama states kuna wase wanataka statues ya kina George Washington zitolewe because walikuwa slave owners na vitu kama hizo. So the same thing hapa mseta kuambia. Naweza kupatia few examples. Like, for example, mseka Kalonzo wa Kiran utaambiwa mbona wase wanaumwa na nyoka mwingi. Na mimi nitakwambia msaje ikuwa president. Ashakuwa vice president, yes. A vice president is a flower girl. Kuna wase watasema amekuwa MP. Ile time alikuwa MP was the CDF this high. So I'm just giving you an example. I'm not in whatever, but nakupatia example. Na hii ndio ujinga mtaambiwa, alafu mtaenda up mmesema hakuna tofauti, wacha Ruto to ingie. Huko sure Kalonzo angeuza airport. I don't even think Uhuru thought this guy would sell the airport. That's how much selling an airport is a big deal. But now the church needs to shut the fuck up. But apart from hivyo, pia huu mse, hasa watu wanatuambia 70% pia wananid kunyamaza. Na pia kama wewe ni mse ideal unajidanganya sijui a young president will come from nowhere, pia unanid kunyamaza. Na kila mtu ananid kujua that if on that day you stay home, you voted for Ruto. Anyone who will stay home in 2027 will have voted for Ruto. Ndio hiyo kitu mimi nawaambia. Hiyo siku ikikuwa ni kiti, na hii kiti si kiti tu, ni kiti mtu amenyambia na inanuka versus Ruto, mimi napata hiyo kiti imenyambiwa. kura. Why? Because nataka ikuwe lesson to this president. Na number one, he cannot change the constitution. This guy really wants to change the constitution. That's why even if he wanted to stay home, hiyo siku just show up to protect the constitution, to protect presidential terms. If 5 years was enough for Uhuru, and 5 years was enough for Kibaki, 5 years was even enough for Moi when the constitution was changed, 5 years should be enough for this guy. And if he does not want the 5 years, he can fuck off. Now that's what tutakuwa tukitry kufanya in the year 2027. But it's going to be one of the hardest things that we've ever done. Why? Because the opposition, there's no opposition. Na chikiasa wa ODM wanashinda tu wakisema vile watavotia umse. Because I think amewapatia a certain amount of money ile, I don't know, imefanya wakachizi. But one thing is for sure, it's going to be a hard task, but it can be done. And the only way to do it is to start right now. And you start by even educating that Form 1 kid, that one who's 15 years old, who in 3 years time will be ready to vote. Mwambie jo, in 2027 tuna vote, na tuna vote kuchange, msana try kuchange the constitution. But apart from kuchange the constitution, msana try kuuza inchi. Na apart from that, ni mtu akipatia church pesa tena, church itamuendorse. That's why ukienda usikize speech ya huyo Teresia Wairimo, utasikia akisema in 2027 you'll have to convince me again. Basically what she's saying is in 2027 rais, make sure umenipatia more money. Ekonene.
As a voter, I'm embarrassed.
Kama mpiga kura ninaibika sana.
And the next election you must convince me.
Na katika uchaguzi ujao